What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of health checkup on the Mustang here. The reason being is I plan on down the road doing some kind of forced induction, whether it be supercharger or turbocharging. I want to know whether or not this engine is healthy enough to be able to do that. So we're going to be doing some testing today just to find out if we have some worn rings or burned valves or anything like that. I do have a little bit of timing chain rattle from the front end of the car on cold startups. That's to be expected. This car has 240,000 miles on it, so there's probably a little bit of wear in those timing chain guides. I do plan on replacing timing chain guides and chains and all that stuff. That may come with me doing cams and springs and stuff like that as well. That's to be determined based on what the health of the engine is from the test that we do today, because if engine needs rebuilt, then I'm obviously not going to put a whole bunch of money into the cams and all that stuff. But we'll go from there. We'll go, figure out where we're at after doing all this testing today. Today we're going to be using a cylinder compression tester, primarily compression tester, and then this vacuum gauge. These are both tools that I've purchased myself. I will leave links in the description to both of these. We're going to do a compression test just to make sure that all the cylinders are good, and then we're also going to use a vacuum gauge just to make sure that we don't have any issues with burn valves or vacuum leaks or anything like that. If I do find that I have issues with a compression test, I will then resort to doing a cylinder leak down test in order to try to figure out what's causing the problem. But most of what I'm going to be doing today is a compression test and then using the vacuum gauge to check, vacuum during certain engine operations. First thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to get the engine warmed up to operating temperature, because you're supposed to do compression test and vacuum checking, all that stuff with the engine operating temperature. So let's get the engine warmed up. All right, ran the engine, got it up to operating temperature. So now, first thing we're going to do is actually do a vacuum check. This will be like a precursor to doing anything else to the engine, just to see what the health of it is. You're going to want to find on your engine someplace where there's a vacuum port. If you're doing a Mustang like mine, there's quite a few on the back of the intake manifold here. There's actually a large fitting here that comes off the intake manifold that's a vacuum port, and then it splits off into a bunch of little Y sections. I actually teed into this Y, and the hose that comes off of this actually goes into the inside of the car and is for the controls for the heater box. So it's not going to affect anything else on the engine. It'll give me a good vacuum reading. So we're going to get this vacuum gauge hooked up. We're going to start the car up, and we're going to show you what the vacuum is at idle. Alright, so as you can see, we have a pretty healthy vacuum reading at idle. Sorry if it's a little bit hard to hear me, and just a little bit noisy. This is a pretty good vacuum reading. It should be anywhere between 17 and 22 inches of mercury, depending on where you are at sea level wise. For every 1,000 feet above sea level you are, that's going to drop off a little bit. Obviously, I'm sitting at about 21, which is probably because we're a little bit above sea level where we're at here. So this is a very, very good reading. Shows that the engine is actually breathing very, very well. There's no issue with the plugged up air filter. Exhaust doesn't have any kind of restriction or anything like that. So this is a good thing. This means going forward, I should see really good numbers out of my compression. It means my engine should be very, very healthy. Another thing you want to do when you're dealing with this type of, when you're doing this type of test, is to do a couple snap throttles just to see what the vacuum drops off to, or goes down to. You should see almost zero when you open the throttle all the way, because you're removing the restriction that's causing the vacuum in the system. So, and then you don't want to see any kind of weird fluctuations or of the needle as it's coming back. And as you can see, it opened up almost to zero and then came all the way back down to where it's sitting at 21 very smoothly. So that indicates good things. So we're going to get the spark plugs pulled out of this thing and get the fuel system disabled. Then we're actually going to do a compression test on all the cylinders. All right, so I got all the coils out, got all the spark plugs out. One thing I have left to do is to disable the fuel system. You can either do that by pulling, depending on what car you're doing this on, fuel pump relay, fuel pump fuse. You can unplug all of the injectors at the fuel rail. This is a little difficult on this car because this throttle body is actually in the way of getting to two of the injectors. The other side, they're all easy to get to. Fords of this year, you actually have a little bit of a cheat. It's a lot easier to get to or try to figure out than the fuel pump fuse. Is the fuel pump inertia cutoff switch is in the trunk on this left hand side. This is designed to cut the fuel pump off if the car flips over. You can either unplug it like I did, or there's actually a testing function of it where you can put like a pocket screwdriver in here and pry up on this little red guy and it'll pop up on its own, and that disables the fuel pump as well. But I just went with throttle unplugging it just to verify for sure that even if this switch was bad for some reason, I know for a fact I have no fuel pump activation. So let's go start running this compression test and logging our results. Alright, so I did the first 4 cylinders. As you can see, cylinder 3 is a little low. I'm not quite sure what the specification is for difference between cylinders on this engine. I'll actually put that in the video here as well as in the description down below. Cylinders 1 and 2 actually look really good. Cylinder 4 is also a good reading. Cylinder 3 is, like I said, a little low, but anything over 100 is good enough to be running and be okay. I don't know that this is going to be okay for doing any kind of power adder in the future. I'm going to proceed to do the other 4 cylinders, and then I'm actually going to try to add a little bit of transmission fluid to the cylinder and see if that compression number goes up, and if it does, then that'll be an indication to me that the rings are actually what's worn out and causing that compression number to be low. But I'm going to get these other 4 cylinders on the other side of the engine done and see what they are, and then we'll start going back over anything that has low compression and doctoring a little bit to see if it comes up. Alright, so I did the compression test on the other 4 cylinders on the other side of the engine. As you can see, all the numbers are really good on the other side. Towards the end of that clip there, I went back to the other side and redid the other 2 cylinders and was actually able to get the 120 to come up to 145 and the 150 to come up to 165. I believe that was due to the hose for the compression gauge not seating properly inside the spark plug well and into where the spark plug threads into, causing it to leak a little bit of pressure past it. So once I made sure it was seated down there properly and nice and tight, my compression ratings came up. If you have a situation like that with your car where the compression readings between 2 adjacent cylinders are low, there's a possibility it could be a blown head gasket. To rule that out, you would put some transmission fluid down in that cylinder and let it sit in there, and then rerun the compression test. And if it doesn't come up, then obviously there's going to be a blown head gasket in the cylinders that's causing that. Or it could be an issue with a burned or bent intake or exhaust valve as well. If your pressures do come up with adding the transmission fluid, then obviously that's going to indicate the rings are not sealing properly, and that would be your reason for your cylinder pressures being low. If it doesn't come up with the fluid put in there, your next step would be to go to the cylinder leakage tester, which is this guy right here, and that's to actually put pressure into the cylinder, and then with the piston at top dead center and both valves closed, you actually have to do a little bit of checking timing and stuff like that in order to do that test properly. We put pressure in the cylinder with the inside and exhaust valves closed and try to hear or see where it's leaking from. you could hear it coming out of the intake or hear it coming out of the exhaust if the pressure's leaking out there. There's a possibility there could be a crack in one of the cylinders. You'd see it coming out of the coolant reservoir if that were the case. There's a lot of variables there, but obviously with mine, my compression numbers are good. I'm not concerned about even though those 2 cylinders being a little bit low, but they're not drastically low. Like I said, there's actually a specification for the difference between cylinders. I will put that in the video as well as in the description down below for this particular engine. Each engine is different. Make sure you figure out what your specs are if you're doing this on anything other than this Mustang that I'm dealing with. I'm happy with those numbers. I'm going to proceed with my future plans of redoing timing chains, redoing and putting cams in it. When I do the timing chain guides, I'm actually probably prior to ordering parts for everything, I'm going to pull everything apart and see how much is damaged or what's damaged and to what extent. And then I'm going to also pull the oil pan off and pull some rod bearings and see how worn out the rod bearings are just because of the high mileage of my engine. I just want to see what they're at. So we'll do that down the road. That'll be a future video. But as of right now, I'm happy with these numbers, with the results of this. That means, you know, this is telling me my engine's healthy and has a lot of life left in it and can proceed with doing a little bit of power adding to it. So if you guys have any questions about this video or anything I did here, please comment down below. I will answer any questions that you guys have. If this helped you guys doing this health check on your own car, whether it be a Mustang or whatever, please like the video. I would really appreciate it if you guys could subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you later.